High stakes tug of war over artificial intelligence. Will federal standards be established or will state regulations take precedence? The future development and use of the technology is at stake as China and the United States compete for global AI dominance. Sam Rouse is the David Boaz Resident Writing Fellow at Young Voices. Sam, it's good to talk with you again. You recently wrote an article for the Center of the National Interest think tank in which you say the U.S. is at a pivotal moment and faces the choice of a nationwide technological renaissance or politicized battle between the federal government and states. Explain what's happening and why.
Yeah, so what we've seen over the past 2 years since AI really became popularly known as ChatGPT, now it's kind of phased into a number of different sectors of our daily lives on the internet, is a number of state level regulations introduced across the country from both parties, rural to urban areas, trying to regulate this, trying to really clamp down on what are seen as some of the potential harms, some of the potential misuse of this technology. What we're getting at here is really tension between the states and the federal government in terms of how this technology is going to be regulated and how it's going to be implemented into our daily lives.
And you're right that California Governor Newsom vetoed a bill that would have required a kill switch for large AI models. Which states are considering similar legislation, and how would that affect AI innovation?
Yeah, so fortunately, that bill was ultimately vetoed, but New York appears rather close to passing what is very similar legislation, which would not, try to create different statutes for criminal behavior, different rules for, how to address consumer harms, how to address property rights, but rather this kind of big, broad regulatory framework that lets the government kind of have say not at the end stake, not when something as bad has happened and say, okay, now we need to intervene and prevent damages, but rather let them preemptively determine what technologies can and can't be used, determine when AI can be applied in different circumstances. It really harms the opportunities presented by AI.
Well, recently, ChatGPT has encouraged people to commit suicide and murder their bullies. Meta's chatbot is now being investigated for having sensual chats with children. Shouldn't there be a kill switch on that, federal or state regulations to prevent people and children from being harmed?
Yeah, I think that at the end of the day, what this breaks down to is whether we want laws created around specific harmful instances, or we want these kind of broad sweeping mandates. And so I think that certainly there's a lot of interest, even by the tech companies themselves, to collaborate with lawmakers on ways to make sure that these tools aren't misused, that these tools aren't causing for, serious damage and potential loss of life to Americans. But I think the concern from the current laws that have been introduced so far is it's not really doing that. It's not really narrowing in on a lot of things that aren't new. The people, have committed crimes for a long time with different technologies. They try to regulate our guns that way. They try to regulate our access to books and information that way. What these laws are really doing is just interfering with product development and the tech marketplace.
I've got to ask you to share your thoughts on China's AI efforts. There have been security and privacy concerns, of course, about DeepSeek, but China's now having persistent technical issues with AI development as it depends on Huawei chips instead of NVIDIA chips. It seems they're suffering some setbacks as NVIDIA brings manufacturing to the U.S. They're pledging to spend about $500 billion in the next 4 years, initially in Arizona and Texas. So what difference will that make in the U.S. AI global dominance race with China?
Yeah, I certainly think we remain ahead of China first and foremost because of our free and open system. I think that not only do markets and businesses respond to our capitalist framework, letting people compete and innovate in a way that isn't top down and controlled by the government, but also by how we have a free flow of information and free speech rights in this country. AI feeds off of the information that it obtains and it interacts with people that are using it and continues to grow. And so you can only really do that when people have the freedom to express themselves, the freedom to share different ideas with it so that it can really, think through these things and develop that knowledge. Whereas China, their internet is so highly regulated and censored and controlled, and they don't want different parts of history taught. They don't want different current events taught. And so their AI is always going to be behind us if we continue to remain a system that is open and does not try to regulate speech, does not try to regulate the content that's going into these tools.
President Trump has already signed an executive order advancing efforts for U.S. dominance on AI development and deployment, but you suggest that's not enough. What must Congress do and why?
Yeah, so under the One Big Beautiful Bill initial discussions, there was discussions of passing a federal framework in the form of a moratorium, but I think that this could be done as individual legislation, taking action on a federal law before state lawmakers create this kind of maze of regulations that these companies need to comply with in different jurisdictions, will ultimately save them a lot of time and a lot of money that can be put towards developing these tools in the way that best serves all of us and help us beat China at the end of the day.
Okay, Sam Ross, resident writing fellow at Young Voices. Nice talking with you again, Sam. God bless you.
Thank you so much.